Welcome to our celebration of 50 years of the Laffer curve. Actually, it is 51, but just like Elton John, Arthur is going to make this tour go on forever, which we love. It is such a joy to be with you to celebrate economic excellence. But it's not the only thing we're celebrating. This 50th birthday of now famous world Laffer curve. We're super excited. Dr. Laffer is a legend in the world of economics and public policy, and I am honored to count him as a close friend. Most of you know the famous story by now, and we will watch a video soon, but 50 years ago, Arthur sat down for lunch with Dick Cheney and Don Rumsfeld, who was an ALEC donor, and sketched the Laffer curve on a napkin, hence your cocktail napkins, explaining the simplest way possible of how tax rates impact economic behavior. That little napkin changed the course of economic policy, inspired by the Reagan Revolution, and remains one of the most impactful economic insights of our time. The Laffer curve has given economists a commonsensical, not rocket surgery, but important tool to explain the damaging effects of taxes in economy, setting off an economic revolution. As Art and his co-authors wrote, quote, "The evidence indicates again, in case after case, that lower taxes have resulted in economic growth and employment and the broadening of economic opportunity." For 18 years, Arthur has stood side by side with ALEC to lead the way in principled economic policy and innovation. Every year, he has worked with our own Jonathan Williams and Steve Moore to produce one of the most anticipated annual releases for state lawmakers and policy watchers alike, Rich States, Poor States. Thanks to their efforts, Rich States, Poor States has become an essential document for legislators looking to bring the flat tax revolution to their states, or the lower tax revolution to their states. Together, ALEC and Dr. Laffer provide a roadmap for lowering taxes, unleashing growth, and providing federalism is live and well. I'd like to bring Dr. Laffer up to the stage right now, because what makes tonight so special is we are giving away the Laffer Award for Economic Excellence. Come on up.
Watch, I'll slip and fall flat in my butt.
No, you're not going to do that.
Okay.
All right.
Have you got something? You're going to read more?
You're going to wing it. No.
I'm going to wing it. You read it.
I read it.
That was cool.
Well,
You going to stay up here?
I'm going to stay right here.
Why don't you sit down and enjoy yourself?
Well, you and Steve are going to sit here. You are going to announce the award.
The award goes to...
Drum roll, please.
And
And maybe you want to say something about these.
I have been going to the U.S. Treasury as a visitor, starting with John Anderson. John Anderson, what? That was under Eisenhower. George Humphrey as well. George Humphrey was a good friend of my father's. I went there at 10 years old, 11 years old to the Treasury. It was, what was his name at the FBI? Hoover? J. Edgar Hoover. There was a little place down in the basement down there. There were about 10 of us from my little prep school, which was where George Humphrey went as well. And we got down in the basement there, and we all got to shoot a machine gun with J. Edgar. That's sort of cool. That is way cool. I've been going to the Treasury now for, I guess it's been 77 years. I've been going to the Treasury. Almost all the secretaries I've been through there. John Anderson, I said, George Humphrey. George Shultz, I was a consultant to the Secretary of Treasury with George Shultz. I had my sneaky little entrance there coming in there. And then Bill Simon. And if you go all in there, this year's winner, this year's recipient of the Excellence Award, which was misnomed the Laffer Award, excuse me, but I love it, love it, love it. Thank you very much. Goes to Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent. Not only for all of the accomplishments, and he, by the way, is a fellow Yaley a fellow Yaley, great guy, super person, entrepreneur. He worked for George Soros. But he made a lot of money off of George Soros, so that's all right. In fact, what has he said? I made a fortune betting against Goldman Sachs. I love a guy who can say that and make it really true. But it's not only for the big, beautiful bill, which he did, and that was phenomenal. I mean, but this is also an anticipation of all that he's going to do into the future. So, Scott, wherever you are, congratulations on being a recipient of the award, the Excellence
Good
Award.
evening.
And thank
to
you.
begin, I'd like to thank Lisa Nelson for her dedication and visionary leadership at ALEC. With Lisa at the helm, ALEC has been a powerful advocate for limited government and free enterprise, shaping policies in every state house across the country. I wish I could be with Lisa and all of you in person this evening, but my responsibilities require me to be at Treasury, where we are hard at work implementing President Trump's economic agenda. Under President Trump's leadership, we are entering a new golden age. Through tax deals, trade deals, peace deals, and deregulation, President Trump is unleashing the full potential of the American economy. In just 10 months, President Trump has reignited our manufacturing sector, enacted the largest tax cut for American workers in our nation's history, and drawn trillions of dollars in new investment to the United States. Real GDP growth has averaged 4% over the last 2 quarters, and business investment jumped 15% nationwide in the first half of this year, the largest increase we have seen in over a decade. Thanks to President Trump's policies, Americans can expect more jobs, higher real incomes, and strong non-inflationary growth in 2026, along with larger refunds in the first quarter. This administration is committed to building the strongest economy the world has ever known. So tonight, it's both a validation of that mission and a tremendous honor for me to accept the Laffer Award for Economic Excellence. This award is aptly named. More than 40 years ago, at a restaurant right across the street from here, my longtime friend and mentor, Dr. Arthur B. Laffer, changed the course of economic history with nothing more than a restaurant napkin and a ballpoint pen. The year was 1974, and Art had been tasked to shape President Gerald Ford's economic agenda. White House aides were weighing the possibility of a 5% tax surcharge, but Dr. Laffer advised against it. As he explained, between too high and too low, there's a Goldilocks tax rate that maximizes economic output while still funding the government's needs, and it's a policymaker's mission to find it. To illustrate this concept, Dr. Laffer pulled a black pen and used the back of his dinner napkin to sketch the now famous Laffer curve. The Laffer curve overthrew decades of economic orthodoxy to become the foundation of Republican tax policy. It inspired President Reagan's tax reforms, which ignited the economic booms of the 1980s. It was the blueprint for the 2017 Trump tax cuts, which led to strong growth, low inflation, and historic increases in household living standards. And it was the driving force behind President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill, which solidified the largest tax cut for American workers in our nation's history. With Dr. Laffer's endorsement on the One Big Beautiful Bill, and thanks to the support of ALEC and more than 600 of your legislative members, we were able to pass this legislation into law, securing a monumental victory for the American people. ALEC and its members have been essential in making the case for supply-side economics on Capitol Hill and in state legislatures across the country. No one is closer to voters than state representatives. You have your finger on the pulse of America's heartland in a way few elected officials do. We need your input across all levels of government, so please don't hesitate to visit the next time you're in Washington. I'm grateful to ALEC for its decades-long advocacy of pro-growth policies, and I'm grateful to Art Laffer for his close friendship with President Trump and the invaluable guidance he continues to give this administration. Art Laffer is synonymous with economic excellence, so it's an honor for me to accept an award named after him. Thank you to Lisa and everyone at ALEC for this special recognition, and thank you to Dr. Laffer for your patriotism and public service. I look forward to continuing to work with Dr. Laffer, ALEC's members, and President Trump to make America great again. Thank you.
You get to sit down, and I'm going to invite the one and only Steve Moore to come up. And we're going to engage in a fun banter between Steve and Dr. Laffer on economic policy. Come on up, Steve.
Oh. Hey, Steve. Oh, there it's on. Why did you...
Well, hello, folks. By the way, let's give a nice round of applause to Lisa for one of the great ALEC meetings ever. So thank you, Lisa, for what you do. We want, by the way, they brought in some extra chairs, so if people want to sit, there are still some seats available. We're not going to talk too long, but we wanted to present some material to you that I think you'll all find interesting. How many of you, by the way, in this room get our Unleashed Prosperity hotline in the morning? Raise your hand. Okay, if you're not getting it, Tim, where's Tim? So Tim, give your card to me or Tim, and we'll get that for you. It only costs $1,000. No, it's absolutely free, and we want you to have it. It has great information every morning about how we can unleash prosperity. So before I get to our conversation with Arthur Laffer, I wanted to show you one of our latest projects that I think you'll find very helpful in your states, and I think illuminates the importance of the Laffer curve. And so we've created a website based on, it took us about a year and a half to put this together. It's based on all the Census Bureau data and all of the IRS data about where people are moving to and where people are moving from. And this is easy to remember. The name of the site is Vote With Your Feet. Vote With Your Feet. So just Google that, and this will come up. And I just want to show you a few examples of why this matters and why it's important, why it can be a useful tool in your state. And so what you're looking at here is sort of the opening page of the website. And what's kind of cool about this site is you can click on any two states, and it will show you both how many people are moving from one state to the other, and it will also show you how much money, based on the IRS data, how much money they've taken with them. So let's take the classic example, Tim. I don't know, how about California and...
Tennessee.
Yeah, D.C.?
Tennessee.
Okay. Why Tennessee?
That's what I did.
Okay, let's do California and Tennessee. So this shows you the money that has flowed to from California. What is the number, Tim? Oh, there it is. Yeah. So you can see, billions of dollars have left California and gone to Tennessee. So let's do just one other example. How about New York to Florida? How about that one? Where do you think people are moving to?
I think they're going from Florida to New York.
Exactly.
I mean, you're talking about welfare recipients.
Right, exactly.
And people who don't like the curve.
So you can see here, this is enormous. $195 billion has left New York and gone to California over that period. It's really astonishing. So the story here is very simple. The low-tax states have tended to, they're basically bleeding the high-tax, mostly.
Really a lot smaller than I am. Whenever I got on the podium with Milton Friedman, I was able to move the microphone up. Now, the same thing when I debate Bob Reich, I also get to move the microphone up. The only difference between Bob Reich and Milton Friedman is that I actually look up to Milton Friedman.
So we want to make this fun for you. So can you just quickly tell them your story about when you first met Arnold Schwarzenegger and what he said to you about autonomous?
Well, it wasn't the first. I was invited over. He was, Gray Davis was being recalled. And if Gray Davis were recalled, then they had a whole list of names that you got to vote for, and the winner of that, but it was a conditional vote on the second one. And Arnold Schwarzenegger got up and won and became governor of California this way. And he invited me over to his house and for breakfast. And I got there, and he was wearing this knit shirt. And I don't know if you know what a knit shirt is, but it's sort of, you can see through it. And, he was a bodybuilder thing, and whenever he moved, all these parts of his body would move and wiggle with it. I mean, it was just, oh, my God. I mean, no, I can't. It just really was weird. And I said, it's so nice to be here, and I'm really so excited about you being the governor. And when I heard, I just can't tell you, when I heard, I was over the moon when I heard that Wilson and Buffett were supporting your race. I was just couldn't believe how stoked I was, and then how disappointed I was when it was Pete and Warren Buffett, not Jimmy and Owen. And I thought it was Jimmy Buffett and Owen Wilson. No, it was Pete Wilson and Warren Buffett, but that was it. And he goes, ah, ha, ha, he wriggles like that. He says, and then he looks at me and he says, Asa, why is it all you clear-thinking economists are so short? I mean, where the hell does that come from? I mean, you're right out of the blue. And he says, no, it's true, Milton Friedman. He can't be more than 4 feet 6 inches tall, a little tiny man. And you, Asa, you remind me of Donnie DeVito. I starred with him in Twins. So that was my first
Compliment, by the way.
Well, I beat Milton out. I was with Danny DeVito. I mean, never mind. But
Okay, so let's talk a little bit
I
about
thought
the
we were
Laffer
into the
curve.
video.
What's that? Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yep.
No,
Where is it? Go ahead, show it.
Take one. My name is Arthur Laffer. I'm an economist. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and we're here in Washington, D.C. at the W Hotel. I was in the OMB. I was the chief economist at the OMB then, and I found my friends up there in the OMB really boring, so I always came down and hung out with the OEO people. Bill Bradley was in that group, and
Bradley was
Christine
there for a
Todd
while.
Whitman and Jim Leach, I
They
think
were
was.
interns, as I recall.
Yeah, interns, and it was just a fun group of people.
Art Laffer, Dick Cheney, and I would have dinner from time to time, or lunch from time to time, or just have meetings in the White House from time to time.
In 1974, we came to the Hotel Washington, to the Two Continents restaurant. That's where we sat down and talked about tax policy, and Art drew the Laffer curve.
I invited Jude Winniski, who was a writer for the Wall Street Journal at the time. He passed on. But he kept all the records of this stuff. And in an article much later, it was called Taxes, Revenues, and the Laffer Curve, he recounted this dinner. And so it was the four of us. And that is the dinner we're talking about today.
During that time, and what we were trying to do, obviously, was manage this transition from the Nixon administration to the Ford administration. And there'd never been anything like it.
And the country was faced with some serious economic problems, and what was coming up through the system was not what I felt represented the direction the country should go. And it was in large measure coming, I think it's safe to say, from speechwriters as opposed to economists.
We were spending a lot of time on the economic program that
Oh my
fall.
gosh.
We were still doing it at Vail at Christmas time.
I remember that very well. We spent a lot of time in ski clothes in the living room of the house that Ford was renting.
Yeah, the Bass House.
Jerry Ford was proposing a tax increase, a 5% tax surcharge. And so I was talking with Don back then, who was chief of staff, and Dick, who was deputy chief of staff. I said, look, guys, you're not going to get 5% more revenue with a 5% tax surcharge. Now, you may get 4% more revenue, you may get 3%. You might also lose revenue because the tax base will shrink. I drew that little curve on a napkin to illustrate that.
Just one of those events that stuck out in my mind, because it's not every day you see somebody whip out a Sharpie and mark up, the cloth napkin at the dinner table. Yeah, he was that way. He drew out a lot of napkins. My recollection is we were in the restaurant downstairs, sitting at a table about like this, and you drew the curve on the napkin. I was struck by it when you did it. Now, I never got the napkin.
But I have the napkin that's in the Smithsonian was to Don Rumsfeld from Arthur Laffer. And why, if I did that, would Don not have picked it up?
I don't want that trash.
I had to deal with this all the time. But I do all these mathematical models of the effects of taxes, which, if you know the math, it works out pretty nicely, but it doesn't have the sort of the bite, the flavor of the real world. So I would develop all of these anecdotes to try to illustrate the economics, one of which was the Laffer curve, which if you tax people at 100%, no one will work because they don't get an incentive to work, and the government will collect no revenues. If you tax people at 0%, everyone will work like mad, but you're not collecting any revenues.
Well, basically, the curve showed that with a tax rate of 0, you were going to collect 0 taxes. With a tax rate of 100%, you're going to collect zero revenue. You shut down the economy.
It had the power of simplicity. It was a truth that could be expressed in a paragraph. We each turned to each other and said, Arthur Laffer is absolutely brilliant. My memory's not perfect. I'm 82 years old. I could be wrong.
Here's a question for you. When did Reagan first see the Laffer curve?
Well, Reagan, I used to have, like with you, Don, I used to have lunch with Reagan during the 76 to 80 period. And he'd come in, just the two of us, and he'd come in with all these paper stacks and with paper clips in them and ask me questions about it. Marty Anderson wrote in the book Revolution. He remembered the day he saw it and understood it. And he said, I just saw the president, but I don't remember that, to be honest with you. I remember doing that with the president, but politics is where the rubber hits the road. I'm not held responsible for public policy. I'm this guy sitting at the dinner and I go home at night. They actually are held accountable, but they understood what I said. They understood the context in which it was done, and then they had to take those ideas and blend them with the politics in the real world.
It clearly had an impact on the way, at least on our side of the aisle, people began to think about economic policy and tax policy and revenues and growth. So it was, for me, it was a significant moment in my own development, if I can put it in those terms.
It was so simple and so compelling that the traditional liberal view was contested. The traditional conservative view of it was contested.
It's not Republican, it's not Democrat, it's not liberal, it's not conservative, it's not left-wing, it's not right-wing. It's economics. Okay, vertical axis, horizontal axis, tax revenues.
Vertical is the tax rate, in case you forgot. And the curve goes out like this. You may not remember that.
It's a bell curve.
It's a bell curve, yeah.
Here's 100% right here. This is a zero.
Where's Jude when we need him?
Jude should be here, though. You know, it really is sad because he made all of this stuff really happen. It was amazing. This time I'm going to make this to my friend, Dick Cheney. You got the first one and you gave it away, Don.
Pardon me?
Saving the
Oh, you're saving it?
he's getting it.
This time I'm going to get the
It's
net.
going to go in the Cheney Museum.
Right.
Old friends are the best friends, and there's no question but that we've all three been friends for many, many decades now. Something, I suppose, exceeding 40 years, 4 decades.
These are my two favorite people, as you can tell.
As long as we agreed with him, he liked us.
Art's, I say, one of the more interesting personalities around, and so I have lunch and somebody else paid for it. Yeah.
What does it say?
That's classified.
So I want to talk with Arthur a little bit about the Laffer curve and about the kind of, we're going to give you a quick economic history lesson if we could, because I think this is so important. And I'm going to just start by telling you just a quick little fun story as a prelude to this, which is about, 2 or 3 months ago, I was privileged enough to go over to the White House and meet with President Trump. And we were in the Oval Office. You've been there many, many, many times, but it was kind of cool to go there and be in the Oval Office with President Trump. And one of the first things he asked me when I sat down is, he said, "Steve, how do you like the way I've redecorated the Oval Office?" And I kind of look around, and what Trump has done in the Oval Office, really kind of cool, is he's put up portraits of the great presidents. And he had, by the way, he has a bust of Ben Franklin there, and then right over his right corners, he's got Reagan, and then, and I look behind me, and there's, Thomas Jefferson, and of course George Washington, and Roosevelt, and so on and so forth. And so I looked around and I said, "This is fantastic, Mr. President, but you're missing someone. You're missing one of our greatest presidents." Can anybody guess who that was? Who said Coolidge? You are exactly right. He did not have the portrait of Calvin Coolidge. And so I said to him, "You're missing Calvin Coolidge." And he said to me, "Oh, Steve, was Calvin Coolidge a great president?" I said, "Hell yes, he was a great president, because when he came into office, and correct me if I'm wrong on these numbers, The highest income tax rate was 70-something?
Harding and Coolidge, 73%. It was 73% when they took office.
And
they won the election of 1920
Yeah.
by the largest percentage ever against Cox, who was the governor of Ohio at the time, and his best friend was the Undersecretary of the Navy, who was his running mate, a guy named Franklin Delano Roosevelt, just for the record.
And so he brought that rate down from 73 to
25.
Now, here is the quiz question to make sure you're all paying attention. The highest income tax rate went from 73% to 25%. What do you think happened to tax revenues? They went up like crazy, right? One of the biggest.
11 straight years of surpluses in the U.S. federal budget. Price levels fell throughout that period. The unemployment rate was lower than 2%. It was called the Roaring 20s.
Yep.
It was incredible.
Okay, so, by the way, I'm going to tell you something about Arthur Laffer. You all know, you've all heard the accolades. I mean, he wrote the Reagan tax cut, had a huge impact on Trump's tax cut, and was an apostle of the Reagan tax cut. You probably don't know that Arthur Laffer was the author of the Calvin Coolidge tax cut.
How do they do that? Would it be appropriate to do it this way? Steve.
Okay, so let's get serious. Okay, so we started in the 1920s. We have the big boom, the Roaring 20s, one of the great periods you just mentioned, some of those statistics. And then we get to Coolidge leaves office. Herbert Hoover is elected president by a landslide, right? A landslide.
He won very nicely.
Yeah, and what happened?
Well, as Secretary of Commerce, he'd been sponsoring this thing called a protectionist bill to protect U.S. farmers from imports. And it was a tariff bill. And when he got elected, everyone else piled on because they knew something big was going to happen, and it did happen. It was called the Smoot-Hawley tariff, and it covered all sorts of things. The largest tax increase on traded products in U.S. history. And that was
How high did those tariffs go?
I think I don't know how there were thousands of different tariffs, each one on a napkin with a curly Q on the one corner that folds into something less than 3 square inches. I mean, you can't believe, if you go to the tariff legislation, the detail there, I mean, it's thousands and thousands of pages describing each product it's almost each unit of there it goes through. Right. And the tariffs, I think, were total static, I think, 20%. Brian Dimitrovic, who co-authored the book Taxes Have Consequences with me, and Dr. Gene Sinkfield, by the way, who also received the Excellence Award, the Laffer Excellence Award. Brian, how high did they raise those tariffs?
Wow.
59%. Does that give you a flavor?
59%.
There. And by the way, the U.S. was very dependent on trade there.
Yeah.
This bill passed the House and the Senate in the fourth quarter of 1929. In that quarter, the stock market went from its peak. It dropped 35% in that quarter. It kept falling. It was signed into law by Herbert Hoover on June 30th. On July 1st.
So hold on. Why did he do it? Why was there this? Because the economy was booming. Why did they need a tariff law?
Well, they needed a tariff to protect all these U.S. domestic industries like farmers and other ones, and they all came in there for the gouging. Okay. It was very similar to the 86 Tax Act when Packwood and Moynihan were sitting there with a bottle of scotch, bam, and every lobbyist, it was called the lobbyists at Gucci Gulch. Yeah. If any of you remember the phrase there of Gucci Gulch, they all came in for their little favorite tax, little blah, blah, blah. And he just said, screw them all, get rid of it, we're just going to lower the rate. They lowered the rate from 50% to 28%. That's in 1986. Same thing happened here, except they didn't have Moynihan and Packwood. And so all those little tariffs came through. Every lobbyist had their own little protection thing for all the different things. Each of the lobbyists wrote it all up, and it was this massive bill. And did the market go down?
Now, some people, there's an historical argument about whether the Smoot-Hawley tariff really caused the market crash. Do you believe it did?
Yes, totally. Yes.
Okay.
I don't. Well, look at Jude Winniski. Yeah. If any of you get a chance, read The Way the World Works.
Right.
Jude Winniski goes to it by day in the newspaper, and the falls in the market there, and all of these economists and all these other people, and all very nice people, but really ignorant. And these guys, the market just followed it by day. The passage, as I told you, it passed the House and the Senate when market went down 35%. Right. When it was signed into law, the market fell to 13% of its previous high.
Wow.
13%. That's like, what is it now? What's the market today? 45,000, 45,000, something like that. That like it falls down to what is it? Would fall down to 7,000?
So
would that be a good enough fall for you?
So we have these
6, 8 months.
So we have this market crash. It causes the Great Depression. What was it? Why did the Great Depression last so long?
Well, it's sort of interesting what happened in the Great Depression. Back then, there wasn't withholding. So you had to pay your taxes, I think it was by May of the next year. All right? It wasn't April. I don't think it was April. It was by May of the next year. So there was no effect on the federal government when it put the tariffs on there. You know, when the market crashed in 29, in 30, they got the revenues from 29. So they are fine. And then the next year they do it, and then they had to raise the taxes because the federal government was going bankrupt. So Herbert Hoover, on January 1st, 1932, raised the highest marginal income tax rate from 25% to 63%.
To what?
Highest marginal income tax rate from 25% to 63%.
63%.
On one day.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, and it was retroactive, by the way. He really passed it in, I think it was May, June, July, and made it retroactive to January 1st, raised it there. They raised taxes on everything that walked, crawled, swam, flew, whatever it did, they raised these taxes. You can't believe going through it all. They shortened the brackets, they raised the lowest rates, they raised everything, and of course, ba-boom, unemployment rate went up to almost 30% during this period. Right. It was just absolutely, it runs on banks and all of that, as you would expect that. And what did they do? Roosevelt took office. He was elected in 32 by a landslide. Right. Hoover was thrown out. Right. Roosevelt took office in March. By the way, they took office then in March of the next year. First thing he did was he passed the Bank Holiday Act, which made it illegal for private Americans to hold gold. Only country that's ever done that. Confiscated all the gold at $20.67 an ounce. You had to turn in, criminally, had to turn in your gold, which you did. They paid $20.67 an ounce for it. 6 months later, they devalued the dollar to $35 an ounce. Wow. It was the biggest wealth tax the U.S. has ever seen. Wow. By 1937, I think they raised the highest tax rate to 79%. They put in the Social Security tax in there. And by 1944, the highest tax rate had risen to only 94%.
So why do people keep saying that Roosevelt got us out of the Great Depression?
He didn't. Roosevelt was co-conspirator along with Herbert Hoover.
Thank you for saying
They were the Bobbsey twins, just like Obama and W, who were the Bobbsey twins in bad day economics today. Just the same.
Okay, so now we win World War II.
Did I insult enough people in this?
Okay, so now we have World War II. We come out of the World War II. And the economy does pretty well.
Well, let me just tell you, in World War II, we come out. There were 3 tax bills passed by the House and the Senate, tax cuts, and Harry Truman vetoed the first one. And then they passed another one, and Harry Truman vetoed that one, too. And then they passed the third one, the House and Senate. This was Bob Taft. If any of you know of Ohio, Ohio used to be a tax-free state that was really good on cutting taxes. Just saying, you need it back again. And this time, the Senate and the House overrode his veto and dropped the tax rate from 94% to 82%.
Wow.
We got that boom. We got the huge cut in spending. And then, of course, it was Harry Truman who raised it back up to 91% because of the Korean War. We needed the funds to fight the Korean War. And Eisenhower, another really wonderful president, kept it at 91% for 8 straight years with 3 deep recessions in those 8 years, just terrible. And then we got John F. Kennedy, who really cut the tax. He cut the highest rate from 91% to 70%. He cut the lowest rate from 20 to 14%. He cut the corporate rate from 52 to 48%. He tried to cut it to 46%.
This was JFK.
This JFK. Thank God Barry Goldwater and Bob Dole were able to stop him from doing that irresponsible act. No, they really were. Bob Dole voted against cutting the highest rate from 91% to 70% because we could not afford the revenue losses. Just think of it back then.
So what happened to revenues after?
After Kennedy just went through the roof. It was called the Go-Go 60s. You know, it was... what was it?
Isn't there some kind of curve that describes this phenomenon?
By the way, to be one serious with you, if I may, just for fun, we're having lots of fun. And I do enjoy being snarky. It's really fun. And at 85, I don't give a damn what they think. But the truth of the matter is, I didn't invent the curve. Just for the record, it's been around for thousands of years. I mean, literally, every price theorist understands you can overprice.
Did
a
Adam
product,
Smith
you can
ever
overprice.
talk about this kind of thing?
And I didn't name it either. That was Jude Winniski who named it, not I who did. And so I didn't invent it, nor did I name it. But I love that it's named the way it is. Right. It was everyone knows the Laffer curve back then. They all knew it, but just not in macroeconomics. It was all in price theory that they had it. But they had come to a rule, a way of thinking that if you raise tax rates by 10%, revenues are going to rise by 10%. And that's still very much the CBO and the budget office ways of thinking. And I'll bet you in every one of your states it's the same thing.
So,
you know.
So, by the way, the reason we're going through this very carefully is this is very different from what kids are learning in school about American history. Most Americans think that, you know, Roosevelt got us out of the Great Depression and all these things. Now, let's turn. So you had the JFK tax cuts. We have a boom. Right?
And the rich, tax revenues from the rich went way up.
Right. So now, then we have the 70s. What caused the?
Well, we had what I called the Four Stooges. Johnson, Nixon, Ford, and Carter, the largest assemblage of bipartisan ignorance probably ever put on planet Earth. That's what happened there, and you can see what happened.
Well, what did they do?
Huh?
What did they do?
Oh, it was catastrophe. If any of you remember the 70s, by the way, if you remember the 70s, you did not come from California, because all of us were too high. No. But let me give you the 70s, the way I like to describe the 70s. In February of 1966, the Dow Jones Industrial Average in early February broke the 1,000 mark. It was an intraday high. It never ended above 1,000. I think the highest ending was 997 something. All right, but it had an intraday high that it went up and just came down. So it hit 1,000 in February of 66. 16 and a half years later, in August of 1982, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was down to 777. Now, just think of that.
And that's a nominal term.
This is a nominal term from 16 and a half years, from February 66 to August of 77, August of 82. It fell by 22.3%. But the worst thing is that the price level trebled during that period.
Right.
So if you look at the real value using 1966 dollars, if you look at the real value, it went from 1,000 down to 235.
Jeez.
It fell by 76.5% in real terms over 16 and a half years.
Wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is a capital B bear market.
Yes.
That's it. It declined at an average annual compound rate of 7% per annum for 16 and a half years. That's what happens when you have abject stupidity in the White House and in Congress.
So
that is exactly
what caused the inflation?
Well, the inflation was we went off gold. And I mean, any of you read my Wall Street Journal pieces, when we devalued the dollar, when we went off gold, of course, the thing collapsed and the dollar just tumbled in the marketplaces. You know, government-run money. Can I do a second with them in this?
Of course.
Okay. Let me break the U.S. monetary policy into two eras. The pre-1913 and the post-1913. Now, 1913, we not only put in the income tax, but we also instituted the Federal Reserve, which was the attempt by the federal government to nationalize and take over the money market. Prior to 1913, we had a private money system in the U.S., all private. Well, the government did three things prior to 1913. Number one, it defined what a dollar was. A dollar is 1/20th of an ounce of gold. A dollar is 1 ounce of silver. Okay, that's a dollar. All right? The second thing it did was it did mint coins. If you got bullion and you walked into the government, they would mint those coins. They would get the correct purity. Then they'd mint the coins, and they'd charge you a commission for doing that. By the way, there were a lot of private mints as well. By no means was the government in control of minting. It was all over the country. We had private mints there, which charged a commission. The thing they did that was important was they went to each bank and audited their balance sheets and their income statements to make sure that they were true and solid and valid. That they did do. So all of the currency in the U.S. back then was an issuance. They were called bank notes. They were the liabilities of individual banks. They put them on a common look, so it looks like a dollar bill does, but you can always see it's LaSalle National Bank or it's First Chicago Bank or whatever the other ones were, Pinnacle Bank or whatever the ones. Some of them every now and then were selling a slight discount to other ones depending upon the solvency of the bank. You know, that's the way it was from 1776 until 1913. What's that? That's 137 years. Then it started with the government, with the Federal Reserve started in 1913, taking over money. Then, as I mentioned to you, Roosevelt's nationalizing, doing the wealth tax with gold and taking all the gold out of circulation, devalued the dollar, all that stuff he did. Then they did the voluntary foreign credit restraint program, the interest equalization tax under Kennedy. This is what I did my dissertation on at Stanford. Was on the voluntary foreign credit restraint program and the interest equalization tax. Then we had the Smithsonian. I was in the White House, and I was George Shultz's right-hand person back in the Smithsonian deal where we went off gold. We broke the link with gold.
Was that a mistake to go off the gold?
Oh, totally a mistake.
Why did they do it?
Because they didn't know any better. And by the way, you can see Paul Volcker and I at the Camp David. Paul Volcker and I were the only two who did not want to go off gold. And you know, I love Paul Volcker. He was a nasty, grumpy guy, but he was really a good economist.
So once we went off the gold standard, is that when the inflation started?
No, it was going through the whole. Let me give you from 1776 to 1913. The dollar bounced around a little bit, but the average rate of inflation in that 137-year period, the average rate of inflation was 0% per year for 137 years. All right? Long bond yields, now this is from Jeremy Siegel and Jeremy Schwartz, the data. They are, by the way, the premier people on interest rates. The long bond yield during that period went from about 5.5% to 4.5% with no wiggles, no bobbles, nothing there. We did have some financial crises, but nothing that affected the long term, no depressions, none of that stuff. It was a beautiful period there. Now, from 1913 to today, the dollar has gone down 35-fold. All right, we've had the greatest depression in U.S. history. We've had calamitous crises throughout the period. We had the Great Recession. I mean, you know, we need to get the dollar out of the government's hand and put it back into private. And the reason I love cryptocurrency so much is I think they are literally the private sector's attempt to replace unhinged paper currencies that have been depreciating for a long. I love Bitcoin. I love Tether. I love the stable currencies. I think we've got a great system here. And as long as we have an administration, and I think it would be almost impossible for them to reverse this now, but maybe not. But
so let's finish with the history lesson, though. So
yeah,
now we're in the 70s.
I'm doing the future now.
The economy crumbles. You've got, you know, huge reductions in incomes and real incomes. You've got high unemployment.
Well, the stock market's exact. I mean, that
and
tells
the
you
stock
everything.
market crash. So then, this is where I want to ask you about the savior. The savior.
Ronald Reagan.
Yeah. So how did that all happen?
Well, it happened. The skies parted. And the sun shone forth onto the fields, and the grass turned green, the trees blossomed and bore fruit, the animals, they multiplied, the enemies of America were pushed offshore, the orphanages were emptied, and every kid was adopted, and Ronald Reagan was elected president of the United States. Yeah. We cut the highest income tax rate in this country, and I know a lot of your kids, but we cut it. The highest rate when he took office was 70%. We cut it to 28. Is that good enough for you? Okay. 70 to 28. We cut the corporate from 46 to 34. All right. We cut the capital gains tax rate from almost 50% to 28%.
Wow.
But we exempted, under Bill Clinton, we exempted owner-occupied homes from capital gains taxes. Effectively, we went from 14 tax brackets to 2 tax brackets, and we had one of the greatest prosperities. From January 1st, 1983, till June 30th of 1984, that's what? An 18-month period? In that 18-month period, U.S. real GDP grew by 12%.
Wow.
We grew by an 8% per annum compound rate for 18 months straight. Boom. I mean, this is the way it has to be done, and that's why I'm a big supporter of Donald Trump's. I think he is the Reagan incarnate, different style, different personality. I never remembered Ronald Reagan yelling at anyone. When he got angry at you, he went, go, Arthur, you know, just Donald Trump, if he's angry with you, you know it.
So-
but the same policies.
So it caused the 80s boom, which was what Bob Bartley, the Wall Street Journal editor, called the 7 fat years, right? And so that was an amazing period of revival. And then, by the way, then we had Bill Clinton. He was a pretty good president.
I voted for Bill Clinton twice, but I would not let my daughter intern in his White House.
Right. So we have the, and then, so then what happened with Joe Biden? Why did we have the big inflation under Biden?
Well, we had the monetary base. I mean, this is getting a little technically, but the monetary base when the Great Recession started, which was in 2007, the end of 2008, just before Obama took office, in the last bit of W. And W, it crashed during W. The monetary base of the U.S., the balance sheet of the Fed, if you want to think of it that way, was about $850 billion. And it went up to about $9.6, $9.7 trillion up to that time. Now it's come back down a little bit now, but that was really the whole reason for why we had the excess liquidity and the huge blow-off under Biden of 20+% there. By the way, my son, it was really cute story. My son, younger one, I have 6 kids, and my younger one comes to me and said, "Dad, I don't like this book." And by Bob Bartley. And I said, "Well, son, why not?" "I just don't like it, Dad." And I said, "Well, son, what's the matter with it?" "Well, the title of the book, Dad." And I said, "Well, yeah, what about the title?" He said, "Is he trying to make fun of you because you're a little overweight?" It was the 7 fat years. My son thought the fat referred to me being a little corpulent at the time. I thought that was cute.
So just to sum up then, now we have Donald Trump, and you had a big impact on his tax bill. Do you like it?
I love it.
Yeah.
And I think we're just beginning.
Yeah.
If I were to make a guess, I would guess that this man will, in the next 3 years, lower the payroll tax very soon, both employer and employee.
We have a little piece in the Wall Street Journal tomorrow about that.
Oh, we do. That says this. And I also believe, and when I'm with him, and I do see him quite, not as much as Steve does, but, you know, I try stopping Steve. Woo! No. But, you know, he always asks me, you know, how am I doing relative to Reagan? And I said, doing great. In the first term, I thought Trump was better than Reagan, although both of them really good. But Reagan did make the mistake of phasing in the tax cuts, which caused the recession of 81, 82. And he said, but, you know, I said, you know, you're really great in that, but, you know, second term, the jury's still out. And I mean, I'm a little worried. He said, why are you worried? I said, well, you know, Reagan was able to get the highest marginal income tax rate down to 28%. He said, I got it down to 21%. I said, no, not the corporate rate. The personal income tax rate, which is 37% is what it is. Yeah. He got it from 37 down, he got it below 28%. He said, now, if I take some of these funds, do you think I could do it? Now, there are some, if I use some of the pay-fors here on 501c3 pay-fors and all this stuff, and it's about $4 trillion there. He said, I'll bet you I could get it down to 15%. You know, I'm not telling you this is because I know it. I'm betting that he's going to get it down to 15% here, and I think we're going to get the corporate rate lowered, and I think we're going to get We're going to get health care price transparency. I think we're going to get a lot of the drug stuff done. I think we're going to get IQOS heat sticks instead of tobacco combustion. I think we're going to get Ozempic, what are these, semaglutides there so the obesity in America. You know, did I tell you about Larry Summers?
You're having fun with this one.
I'm having some fun with you guys today. You don't mind me having a little fun with you, do you? You know, a couple of years ago, I thought that Larry Summers had OCD, and I realized it wasn't OCD, it was obesity. And, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, Larry Summers was not only fat, but he was stupid. But with Ozempic, he's no longer fat, but they ain't no fixing stupid.
So he's a good friend of Epstein's.
Oh, yeah. Well, you didn't have to bring that up.
So I know people have dinners to get to, so I want to just summarize. So like me, you're bullish on what Trump has done in this first year.
I think Trump has been great on all the areas.
Yeah.
Taxes. I mean, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was great. It paid for itself in the first 2 years, just for the record. Numbers show that. Tax revenues, federal tax revenues went up in the first 2 years of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and they went up relative to the prior 2 years, and they went up by more than the prior 2 years had gone up relative to the prior 2 years of that. Now, it was not in corporate tax revenues. That's true. But by now, the corporate tax revenues are way up again. So, at first it was all the other tax revenues took advantage of the growing economy and the lack of sheltering and all that sort of stuff that people do. So it really worked, and I think it's great making it permanent, and it's especially important on the death tax. I mean, I know of no tax that disgusts me more, that I find vile, than the death tax. I mean, you can earn your income fair and square, and you can pay your taxes on that income, and the federal government says you can go to Vegas, you can carouse, you can gamble, you can drink, and you can smoke. And
You can hang out with Jeff Epstein.
You can do it with... Gee, you got this Epstein guy in your mind. You can do all that, and the government says, it's your money, go ahead and do it. But if you give it to your kids or anyone else's kids, you ratfink, you're going to be taxed out the wazoo. What a disgusting tax. I just know of nothing that's worse than that tax, personally.
Yes, thank you. So one final thing, and then we'll let people go, because it is getting late and people have dinners to go to, but we have a lot of state lawmakers in this room.
You guys are, by this way, the salt of the earth.
So the question I have for you is, by the way, is it pretty clear the lesson of this? Low tax rates good, high tax rates bad. It's not that complicated, is it?
But we do need taxes.
Yeah.
I don't want to make it that we're discreet against all taxes. Right. It's not. You want a low rate, broad-based, flat tax, and you want it there so that you have the least incentive for people to evade, avoid, or otherwise not report taxable income, and you have the broadest base with the least number of deductions, exemptions, exclusions, omissions, credits, and all that sort of stuff. So you have that broad-based flat tax, so you collect your taxes. All taxes are bad, but some are worse than others.
So we have a lot. So raise your hand if you are in a state that has an income tax. Look at that. That's a lot of people. So
that's an IQ test, by the way.
How about, you talk about a flat tax, how about a flat income tax rate of 0? We have 9 states, including your state of Tennessee, that have no income tax. Can every state do that?
Yeah. Let me just say that since 1960, 11 states have adopted an income tax. It started with West Virginia in 1961. It ended up with Connecticut in 1991. It included Maine and Rhode Island. It included Connecticut, New Jersey. It included Pennsylvania. It included Ohio. It included, obviously, West Virginia. It included Illinois, Michigan, and Indiana. It included Nebraska. I think I've made them all. If I haven't, I missed one. But they all did. Every single one of those states, by introducing the income tax, has collapsed relative to the rest. In 1965, New Jersey had neither a sales tax nor an income tax. Neither one. Right. It was the fastest growing state in the nation. Everyone was moving to New Jersey. It was
one of the richest states.
And
right?
it was a balanced budget, rich state, everything else. When John Corzine was its governor, it was my student at the University of Chicago, and just in all transparency, a C student. And when we found out he had the global thing there, I'm not even sure he earned the C, given the criminal record there. But they had the highest property taxes, highest sales taxes, highest income taxes, highest corporate taxes, blah, 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 property taxes, all that. Worst state run, biggest deficit. All of these states have just been killed by the income taxes, property. If any of you have been to California, it is not a terrible, horrible gun because of one thing. It has the best property tax system in the world, and property taxes are not chopped liver. They're really important. California has the highest property tax revenues in the nation, and it has the lowest property tax rate in the nation. Tell me what that is. Is that a curve? There's a relationship there? If you go down the coastline in California, you do not see rural West Virginia or rural Kentucky.
Hey, we have a lot of people here from West Virginia.
But they need to help those places. There's no reason why West Virginia can't be California in prosperity. None. Or Ohio or Kentucky. Where I go, I have my farms up in Kentucky. Tennessee is a beautiful example of what you can do. We are the lowest tax state in the nation, bar none. We're the third lowest property tax rate. We have no income tax. We have no death tax. We have no unearned income tax. You know, we do have a sales tax. That's our workforce. And we have the broadest base sales tax of any state in the nation, the least amount of tax expenditures. But, you know, that should be the model. And we still have a long way to go in Tennessee to make it perfect. But, you know, it really can be done, and all of you should do it. Just fold your income tax into your rationalized sales tax, and you're off to the races. And put limits on your property tax. Just adopt Prop 13, and you will be the most prosperous place on earth. And they'll love you for it.
So
Just
most
love
of almost everybody in this room is probably a college graduate. How many of you learned these economic lessons in college? Probably not many. And so this has been an amazing tutorial about how to run an economic system and how we should have the optimal tax policy. It is a great thing that Donald Trump, I think 5.5 years ago, gave Arthur B. Laffer the Congressional Medal of, the Presidential Medal of Honor, which you well deserve. And so thank you for everything you've done for our country, for teaching us. Wouldn't it be a wonderful thing if every young person in America learned economics from Arthur B. Laffer? It would be an amazing thing. So thank you for all you do. Thank you for partnering with us, with Larry Kudlow and Steve Forbes and I at the Unleash Prosperity. And I hope everybody has a wonderful evening. One more time, Lisa, you put on an incredible conference again. So thank you for your leadership. And we are officially adjourned.